if you don't enjoy the job, you should quit.
Well, quitting a
Or find
job,
elements that you can enjoy.
80% of the people don't write code, and they're looking for someone who can write code for them.
But I think the current modern way of working is just too specialized. So you don't actually see the process end to end.
The execution or the actual decision making has nothing to do with us. Working together and coordinating really slows things down. You feel really
Yeah.
frustrated by that.
So you started working on startup projects or just generally trying to get into the startup field when you were working full time. So how did you find the energy and the time to do that? Yeah, first of all, this is a very special episode. It's going to be a pretty casual talk, like a
Right.
chat, and not an interview. So we wanted to have this space for us to discuss a little bit deeper into our own journeys and Sean's journey.
Yeah.
So a little bit of background on Sean. So we met, me and Sean met at MIT. I wear my special MIT shirt here today. But yeah, so we met at the analytics program at MIT. And then Sean, it was, I think, 2 or 3 classes before me, but we
It was
met at the
2020.
so, and then Sean moved on to the Bay Area and worked in several different companies and different job functions.
You work at
Um,
Google, right?
Yes.
At some point, yeah.
yeah. And then after Google, I think you also worked as a PM. So you were a data scientist, analytics before, and then moved on to PM and all that in Sam's Club, and now you're in London now. So yeah, but these are all like pretty labeling kind of
A
identities.
high level
Yeah.
resume or LinkedIn, which is kind of just boring part.
Yeah. So how would you describe yourself or yeah, introduce yourself in your own terms?
I think I consider myself as a product manager who can launch my own MVP, meaning that I don't, because currently I'm trying to build a startup full time. And a funny fact is that when you go to these like tech events or co-founder matching event, 80% of the people don't write code, and they're looking for someone who can write code for them. So in fact, I don't know. I feel like my own skill set allows me to just build something and test things out. And that being said, I think I'm more sort of into doing things practically rather than doing research on the theoretical part. And I also make some YouTube videos talking about tech, startups, and things in general, sometimes inviting friends to have a conversation. So yeah, I guess that's like a quick intro. All other labels you guys already mentioned, so I won't repeat that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you agree. So
I mean,
I'm just curious, what brought you here today? You did the switch. Your
yeah.
undergrad, I didn't touch upon that. Your undergrad was in also in UK, right? And then you moved to
Yes.
the US for a master's, and you kind of worked here and then moved back. So like, how is
But
all these transition come
I
about?
mean, also I think what's interesting is like what triggered all of your interest, and did that shape you into making different decisions of
I think I just went with the flow, honestly. And in high school, I really wanted, like, I heard this term big data, and then people say big
yeah,
data was the sexiest job you could find in 21st
right,
century, which we'll see if that's true or not. But back then, as
yeah,
a high schooler, it's an obvious choice. I just wanted to study stats, and somehow fate brought me to London to study at UCL. So I
yeah,
studied basically stats, econ, and finance at one of the universities based in London, University College London.
yeah,
And my original goal was to be working in either Canary Wharf or Wall Street at some point in my life to be a banker. And apparently that
yeah,
didn't work out. I wasn't, I don't know. I think a lot of people around me back then wanted to be an investment banker. And being an investment banker means that you got to go out there and network with people, especially people from those 9 biggest investment banks. And I couldn't speak English very well back then. So I always was this one of these like invisible dude in
Do
the
you
in the people who are looking for a job. Um, but
do you think
I,
like the
yeah,
investment banker thing is a London thing?
I think
'Cause-
probably that's true. I definitely felt like in the US, I met fewer people who just told me straight away, hey, my goal is to be a banker. My goal is to be a trader.
Yeah.
Maybe because I spent less time in New York City, even though I lived there for a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I came to London. I did my high school certificate in an Australian school in China, and I used the
Okay.
Australian certificate to apply to UK. And
Ah,
yeah, just had this opportunity. And then you mentioned MIT. Yes, I tried to apply to some grad school in the US back then, and it wasn't a very popular choice among the people surrounding me. People just thought, hey, after the universities in London, people tend to go to Oxford or Cambridge. If they study hard, have good grades, they can get in. But applying to the US school means that you need to do GRE or GMAT. And I guess I was just always one of these weird kids who would do extra stuff that could give me more opportunities. Uh, I wasn't sure which opportunities was good, but I just didn't want to set like a constraint on myself. Hey, you can only apply to
yeah.
schools outside of the US. So I did my
Right.
GRE and then applied. And
Oh.
yeah, like it brought me to Boston for a year and another 4 years working in the US.
GRE
Um,
was not easy. I mean,
I
it's
did
a
it
hard thing.
3 times.
Okay.
It was so hard for me. I hated that exam.
I
Um,
I did that in 20, I think 2017, maybe. Because all of my friends were doing that. I was like, okay, I want to beat you guys in the test.
I never
So
used some of the vocabularies I'm tried to memorize from
yeah, no.
GRE in the rest of
I
my
think
life. So
GMAT is like another game. It's like GMAT is like way easier. So like,
I super resonate with what Sean said about transitioning into data. I did that too. My undergrad was in computer science and psychology. I hated writing code, to be honest. I like it when there's no bug. I like it when it's working, but as long as it's not working, I'm like, oh my God, why am I doing this? I'd rather do something more like interpersonal. But yeah,
right.
and I transitioned into data because of my first job. I applied as a computer with my computer science background, but when I go in, it's more on the machine learning and data science track. So I think, this is interesting, and also it was consulting. So I had the interpersonal thing. So I thought, oh, data scientist means you can work on data, you can talk to people and solve problems. Yeah, that was interesting. It's way different here in tech. But yeah.
I thought yours is more data engineering as well, or at
Yeah,
UI.
at EY it was more data engineering. But yeah, that was fun. That was fun. That was different.
hmm.
But I think it's also the location wise, it also matters in terms of how it like pushes you into different um career paths. We're both from Johan and I are both from the East Coast. So more concentrated on like finance, healthcare, other like marketing and all those kind of track versus tech
Yeah.
in the West. But yeah, very
I
interesting.
Yeah.
mean, I'm from Beijing originally, but I sort of identify as ex-New Yorker.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
you went to NYU, right?
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think for me, it's just like, I don't know. I think I just enjoy building stuff. I started, I think in, I don't know, elementary school. There's like some sort of summer like programs where they like parents just send you to these classes, you just do random stuff. There's some math classes, and then there's like one that does like you can program with well, the language is like kind of very rudimentary, just like do different loops and stuff with number. And it's like a single board computer. That's like how I got started. And like in middle school, we just do like some like Lego robots. So a lot of my friends are going on to do like computer science. It's like, okay, maybe I want to do something different. So I was like, okay, VR was a hot thing back then. There's Oculus, there's Google Glass. So okay, I want to do something in that direction. So either like neuroscience or film, because like I also was not really well informed at the time. So like, is there any sort of interdisciplinary stuff I can do? And they ended up doing film, and yeah, and then shot a bunch of stuff in film school, which I think it actually taught a lot about how to work with a team that is hungry and unpaid.
Mm.
Like, you work 12-hour days, you're tired, and then you just eat cold pizza. That's all
It's
part of the
such
reason why I
a
got out of it.
such a New York thing.
Yeah, like, do we do that because we believe in the director or the writer's vision, or do we do that for the money? Because, I think it's a balance in the end. But then I just realized I probably should go back into doing the coding more, because I think it's something that you can just do from your laptop basically, and I think it's
Mhm.
quite cool to like build something, and then yeah, it's just easier to iterate than anything else. And I think you also started like doing more of the full stack stuff, right? Like from on Next, I think you mentioned last time.
Yeah.
Doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. I like Next. It's my savior for bringing me from an analyst who can only write models to someone who can show people what is going on in my brain and let them try it. So yeah, it's sometimes people criticize about, hey, having too much abstraction over some code is not necessarily a good thing, but then it actually opened a ton of doors for people who are less technical by default. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes it easier for people with less full stack experience to try something that's fun about launching things end to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you started working on startup projects or just generally trying to get into the startup field when you were working full time. So how did you find the energy and the time to do that?
I think it's about like so a theory that I have is that if you truly care about what you do, if you truly care about what you work on, it's very easy for you to get bored if you're in an environment where most people don't put 100% effort in. And I think that's a very common case in most of the big companies because, I mean, there's nothing wrong about that. Most people just treat it as a job, and most people just want to, um, or it's, let's
I
say
kind
it's
of
it's
disagree.
not
I kind of disagree.
okay. Okay, what's
I
your
think
point of view?
I think, I think if you should enjoy the job. If you don't enjoy the job, you should quit. Or
Well,
or or
quitting a
or find
job,
elements that you can enjoy.
that part I agree. One mentor told me that if you can always enjoy any job just like it's one of your own products. And I agree with that. But when it comes to things like, hey, I treat this as one of the products that I would like to build to serve my customers, but a lot of the teammates or a lot of the leadership group, because of the way they work, because of let's say the bandwidth or the best practices of planning and um, you know working together and coordinating really slows things down. You feel really
Yeah.
frustrated by that.
Right.
I think that's what I meant mainly. And
Yeah.
the original question was about um, where did you find that energy? I think energy, sometimes people can have more energy when you um, feel motivated by certain things that just trigger you. I think what triggers me is that if I don't feel the energy from um, the tasks that were given to me and people who are doing the same task don't feel as much passion as I do, then I have the extra energy that I can spend elsewhere to work on something that I enjoy.
Mm.
Yeah. But I mean, I just want to like elucidate my point of that is just, I think the issue with, I think big companies now is that there are people who are super aligned with the goal and try to work on something that they think personally are important, but there are also just a lot of things that are not that important. Like, I think how someone can align with a goal is to say, oh, I think this thing's working. I want to work more on that. But to your point, I think a lot of the management are slowing that down because they themselves are not interested in the mission, which
Yeah,
is,
very possible.
you know, it's, I have a lot of problems with middle management. So future hiring managers don't hate me, but yeah.
Yeah, when things go big, it's hard to align everything, right? Yeah.
I think so.
I think,
Yeah.
sometimes I do feel like there's so I think it's very important in terms of like a human's will, like kind of control your own thinking matters a lot. Especially in like harder situations when you hate your job, when you just don't know why you're working on like a single feature, like a small feature that you're working on, you cannot see the bigger picture. Yeah, I think only the ones that I see that are happy in those situations are very good convincers. I don't know if that's even a word for themselves. So they convince themselves the power and that they have, they convince themselves the impact and all that. Yeah, so I think it's kind of like I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but sometimes
Which,
people feel happy when they can convince themselves their work has a meaning when they don't feel
yeah,
like they are having a meaning. Yeah.
which, I mean, I think we're kind of in a world where I think inherently as a human being, we try to find meanings to everything. Where, I mean, in AI, I talk about these like searching for meaning, for random association of random stuff. In behavior, in that we want to see what we do as part of the bigger picture, either like say, going to Mars or try to make some processes simpler for our end users. But I think the current modern way of working is just too specialized. So you don't actually see the process end to end. You only see the part that you're assigned to. And it's hard to gather the whole meaning of the part you work on unless you see the whole picture. If you're like designing UX, you're like, oh, I just care about the UX. I don't care about it, and that is someone else's issue. If you're an engineer, you're like, okay, I don't care about the whole experience. It's not my job.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
curious. I'm curious for both of you. What do you think? What kind of person you think will be a better fit for working in like a big corporate versus working on their own product?
I've definitely seen people who enjoy it and who can excel at it. I'm trying to think what's their commonalities. I think it's for some people who were let's say for data science, right? A lot of the common complaints by data scientists is that I worked on this analysis for a really long time and I presented it for 5 minutes and the vice president said good job, and then the execution or the actual decision making has nothing to do with us, even though data science team try really hard to promote this idea of, hey, how do we drive actions from analytics, from analysis? But in reality, a lot of the analysis never made the step move into actions through data scientists, but it's through general management team or product management team. People who don't have the urge to I don't know, push for decision making, push for actions, but they really enjoy playing around with numbers, playing around with some of the models, really enjoy data science job. That's what I saw from my colleagues who had a really fun time doing this work. But people who think about things more holistically and think about, hey, how do we actually practically build this product? How do we actually, increase the sales? How do we actually, make this go-to-market work? Just by analyzing data is not going to help. You need to take extra steps. And if you already think like 5 steps ahead, it feels frustrating if you don't take that actions, right? So just from data scientist perspective, I think just to conclude, a lot of colleagues who around me who enjoyed it were the people who enjoy their analytical zone, Zen mode. And they just really they just want to put hours in and drink their coffee and try to find interesting patterns among data, which is something that I think I really respect them for being able to putting those time and effort in. But I guess I'm just a little bit impatient sometimes, and I try to ask for more. Yeah, it's harder for people who want to ask for more in a short period of time to really enjoy working on a small feature that doesn't seem like you're going to make a ton of impact in a short time.
Is that why you transition into PM?
I think so. Fundamentally, I wanted to see, okay, so back then, product managers or engineering leads are the ones who were making decisions. What if I try a product management role myself and see what happens? And I think that was the original drive. And secondly, I thought, hey, product manager is something that at least it's a very similar job as a CEO of a startup. It's just that you don't have authority over the team. You can't fire people. You can't hire people. But otherwise, you need to coordinate multiple functions to get people work together for a common vision. I think that part is very similar. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you think your experience as a data scientist helped you to become a better PM, or how was your experience with your DS, because you're already on the other side?
They really enjoyed it, actually. My data science director told me that she's never seen a product manager who can write code in her team. So it made it very easy for her to talk to me about what she's really thinking about, because she would probably take extra effort to explain to any other product manager about a certain model. They probably need to make it sort of business friendly, but to me, she doesn't need to make anything that business friendly. She just talked to me about the technical things. So yeah, it helps with communications for sure.
Right now, when you're creating a project, just on top of your mind, what tools you're using right now?
When you say a project, do you mean a startup or?
Yeah, a startup or product, like an app or a web page or
a
with
startup,
backend.
Yeah. Okay. Anything that I'm familiar with, honestly,
Yeah.
because when you're trying to build something, the most the easiest trap is that you're gonna fall in love with your own product, and you're gonna feel like, hey, I built this thing. This is so cool. Like I use these tech, and as a matter of fact, none of these matters. It matters if like there's gonna be anybody who's gonna use it, right? Because eventually, unless you're building a tool just for yourself, otherwise it's very hard. So initially, you just really need to show people something that functions. And as as Zhao and I were talking about earlier, Next.js is a good framework. I happen to have very little experience in it. I've never, learned it properly. I just copied some code from YouTube, and then it happens to be working by, me talking to ChatGPT. It just works. So I don't really care if in the early days if it's very scalable or not. I mean, maybe it's a very good practice. I just don't know. But for me personally, I just need to talk to a bunch of people and then make something quick for them. So in terms of the tools, I try to stick to TypeScript these days, because I mean JavaScript, TypeScript is still important for the front end, and for the back end, because these days, I mean, who isn't building something AI related, right? So Python is very at the core of most of the stuff AI related. So yeah, I think TypeScript plus Python is a good combo, and it depends on what framework you feel handy. You can just choose whatever.
Would you touch lower level code? I mean, still a high level, but like lower level
at this
languages?
point, no, because firstly, I don't have a lot of I don't personally have a lot of interest in optimizing the very fundamental things. And as long as something works, very similar to how Duan you feel about coding, as long as it works, there's no bug, I feel happy. So yeah, like at the end of the day, I'm making something that, any button on it needs to work. If you click on it, something needs to happen, right? So lower level, I don't have much knowledge in it, but in the short term, I don't see myself spending time to be an expert in it. But I think I should invest enough time to make myself being able to prompt about it. If I need to really know something, let's say because currently I'm looking into education,
Yeah.
Let's say if your education tool really scales up and you need to process a lot of video data or image data, and my initial tech stack just doesn't work when it scales from 1,000 people to 1,000,000 people, then I need to be able to make sure, oh, how do I hire the best backend engineer to redo these things, and how do I
Right.
make sure I know what's going on? Like they're not they're doing the right job, they're doing the right
Yeah.
way, and I should be able to use AI to fill up my gap in the context.
That
Yeah.
brings me to another question for Sean, is that right now you are founding a company in the education space. Are you thinking about expanding the team to a co-founder or like and how would you see yourself positioning yourself as one in charge of one area, and what complementary skill set you're looking for?
Yeah, so the question is about how to expand the team and how do I think about skill set portfolios of a team.
Yeah.
I think I'm personally not in a rush to look for a co-founder immediately, even though it's slightly against what YC tries to promote. Don't be a solo founder, always find someone. I have a few reasonings for myself. The first one is that I feel like before product market fit, most of the time it's very hard to persuade someone who's just technical but don't feel passionate about the problem as much as you do to join you full time. And it happens to several founders, friends around me who eventually convinced their CTO to join after they stick to their problem for a year or two, and their CTO was part-time on the problem with them. But the founder, the core person, him or herself needs to be 120% on it from day one. So I'm not in a rush, not because I don't need one. Of course, I need someone who can help me figure out, scale up problems or fundamental
Right.
problems from a technical perspective. But I'm just not in a rush because I'm still looking for the problems to be solved. And I think secondly, in terms of skill set, I personally sort of lack design skill set, even though I know it's very easy to just pick up something simple from Figma. And I try to do that as a PM as well, because sometimes your designers might be busy working on a project, and then your request might be very small. And it's like a typical fight between product manager and designers, product manager and engineers. Like, why do you want to change something again? So I try to make the minimal changes. Just I do it myself,
Yeah.
and I think it's easy to get hands on these tools, but it's harder to understand sort of some of the best practices behind designing a workflow. So if I were to look for someone in the future, aside from a very technical CTO, I personally would really need someone who's good at design, and hopefully in between design and engineering, so that it's easier to collaborate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you touched upon YC. So you had experience interviewing with them, and also right now you're with Antler.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great accomplishment. I'm just curious about your
Thanks.
experience with both the
So Y Combinator was an obvious choice because I was in San Francisco, and my previous co-founder and I were just just give it a go. Just treat it as another hackathon application, right? Like you need to fill in some forms. Why not? And then we made a video for them. YC definitely has incubated some of the best companies in the past 10, 20 years. Well, Reddit, Dropbox, Cruise, just to name a few. And I think a lot of times for founders, it's more about, like companies usually just kill themselves instead of being killed by someone else in the early days. So you need like this community around you to support you, to encourage you, and to feel that peer pressure. So actually, I was looking for that. I think it matters less about what advice you get. Like, of course, it's great if you have a mentor, but you can get these advice from YouTube anyways. It matters more if you can just join this community and then have that supportive environment where everybody's working hard, everybody's trying to secure the next customer, everybody's like just launching. That's why I think YC was the #1 top choice, because the best people go there. Yeah, and then we didn't get in. Like we got some feedback. I think it's a good starting point as a founder to either apply to YC or interviewed by YC, and they also encourage you, don't get discouraged if they don't accept you. But yeah, I think it's just a typical choice. For Antler, it's it's less like YC, which is even though YC says that it's okay to apply with just ideas, with just a team, but majority, I would say, like the good ones are usually, you know, they already can show some metrics of
Yeah.
the existing product, or the ones who have a really, really strong technical team. They believe they can rebuild this like open source, like fundamental framework.
Mm.
Otherwise it's hard.
Gary
With
Ken was saying
the
something around it, right? Like he cares more about the demo or something.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
implies that, yeah.
Yeah. And then Antler's model is a little bit different. They try to, you know, get a bunch of people to join the cohort first, and then they match you up. And then if you manage to launch a good product and they show some good, you know, evidence at the end of the day, they invest in you. So it's more like a model where, hey, we don't give you, you know, the investment money straight away, but we give you some stipends every month, and you know, you need to pay for your rent. And then at the end of the day, if you worked hard, if you managed to, you know, launch a good product, then they decide to invest in you, and they have good connections in I think they have around 27 sites all over the world. They have good connections locally, so it's good for you to get to know people. Actually, that's the feedback that I heard from most of the people who went to Antler. They told me that they at least have got to met, you know, for example, in the UK, they could met like founders of Deliveroo, which is equivalent to DoorDash. They could met founders with of Revolut, which is like one of the biggest fintech company in Europe. So you could see these founders and get advice from them. And in fact, in San Francisco, oh yeah, no, never mind. San Francisco is just YC. Antler was able to show you this global portfolio where, hey, if you just search an industry, they show you, hey, maybe there's this company that's part of our portfolio in Japan or in Australia that did these things, and you can just reach out to them. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. From my limited understanding, it seems like Antler is more very much an idea and earlier stage versus
Yeah.
YC. And especially I feel like nowadays YC companies has become more and more later
Yeah.
stage from the initial what they started with is more on the side of, oh, you have an idea, we want to support you, we want to support your team, versus now it's more on the side of there are so many people with idea and so many people already have
Yeah.
product that's working and that have their customers already.
Would you feel like maybe Antler is more similar to YC in the earlier cohorts?
Mhm.
Because to me, that seems like so where you just try to build something. That's why you're part of an incubator, I guess. You don't know what you're actually set out to do, so you do it. Versus if you already have something, it's showing traction, then there's actually kind of no point of you joining an incubator besides getting maybe publicity and access to the cohort.
Yeah. From that sense, I think we can define the naming again. Even though I said I don't think naming matters. So probably Antler is more like an incubator, and then YC is more like an accelerator, because
Yeah.
a lot of people have set up with the idea and then they just want to accelerate. But based on, I don't know, based on the some of the YC friends that I had, they told me that it's very extremely common to pivot several times during your 3 months. So even if like initially you got in with this one idea, which I don't know, arguably you could hack the system like that, you know, pitch to them a very grand idea based on your backgrounds, and when you get in, immediately switch to something else and then build something that you want to build otherwise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've definitely seen more companies who are more, you know, like they're already doing a good job and then they join YC than probably in the early days.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm interested to learn about why you want to do the startup, say why education. Because this
Uh,
is like a very specific vertical that I want to target.
Education is one of the fields that I'm looking into. It's just that
Yeah.
currently I'm talking to some potential customers, so it makes it easier to just you know, iterate with them and talk to them. It's because I think a few points. One is that I personally experienced several different education systems, originally from China, and then went to Australia for about 6 months, and then the UK and then the US. So I sort of could see the difference between these education systems, and a lot of things that really triggered me was about personalization and customization on education, which I think wasn't possible back then unless the country has, really good resources on education. And you'll be surprised like how, I don't know, I feel like teachers in Australia really put a ton of time on their students in high school and middle school. Firstly, like there's not as many people in Australia, and they have a lot more resources, so it makes more sense for them to spend more time on the students. And secondly, it's a very one of the biggest exports for Australia's economy, so they definitely have invested more in that. And then comparing that with a lot of the students who don't have that kind of luxury, I just feel like there's something that can be done about it, and that wasn't doable back then before AI. I don't really have a very committed direction yet, but there are several pain points that I'm talking about with some schools. And I think I don't really mind if my initial idea is not as big as, I don't know, the next DoorDash or whatever. Like as long as it's a product, and then people need this product, and then not like not 1 million people need this product, but 1,000 people need this product. I think that's a successful product. So it helps you to get started, to warm up these skills for being a founder. Because a lot of times I feel like people want to be a founder, but then they get discouraged because they feel like, hey, I'm not going to be as that big. Oh, what if this idea doesn't work? I think it doesn't matter. Like you get to practice how to be a founder when you're actually building something that people need. And then after, I don't know, if you sell this product later, you can build the next bigger thing, right? Who says that you're going to only build one product for your life?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's not 0 or 1. There's
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you so
good.
much. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's our pleasure to chat with you.
No, pleasure's mine. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great to have someone doing startup in London, these S International and this accelerators. Most people I come across are just British, so it's really nice.
Yeah, and I do meet you here, Sean. I hope you can come back to the Bay sometime.
Well, the Bay is the center for startups, so if you guys stay there, I will be back at some point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as financial or investment advice. We do not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or timeliness of the information presented. This podcast is not an offer or solicitation for the purchase or sale of any financial instrument. Thank you for subscribing, and see you again soon.